we are stronger as Muslims when we are wealthier, because we can, support more Muslims, give back to the community and things like that. So that's definitely very important to me. And something I'd like to be able to do is also like invest in more Muslim companies and things like that, which, would help them grow and then also increase the Muslim community, the Muslim economy.
Welcome to another episode of the I Love Monday podcast. Today we have Muhammad Lambat, who's come all the way from New Zealand. Founder of Muslim Investing, speaks about Islamic finance and halal investing. So, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast.
You're welcome. What's the weather like in New Zealand compared to here?
It's the complete opposite. It's sunny now. We have flip season, so literally it's summer, going into summer now. So being here, it's freezing.
Yes, why December of all places?
So when we started traveling in July, we kind of packed up our lives in New Zealand, put everything in storage, cancelled our lease, and we're going to be traveling till Eid next year, so about mid-April. So we spent 6 weeks in Malaysia, Southeast Asia, a couple of weeks, and we're here in the UK. So kind of just traveling to see where we want to settle. Hopefully we figure that out.
But you're originally from Midlands, right?
Yeah, I was born and bred in Leicester, and then kind of moved with my family to Malaysia when I was 10, lived there for 12 years.
Okay, great. Muslim investing, why did you start? When did you start? How did you start?
Yeah, so I started Muslim investing in 2020. So at the time I was in New Zealand. I had just finished my degree in mechatronic engineering and was not really sure why I did engineering. And I wasn't super passionate about it. And in that time, we made a decision to move to Sydney, kind of see if we wanted to live there. And I didn't have a job at the time, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, what I was passionate about. And I realized, hey, I actually really enjoy investing and like talking about money and things like that. And there wasn't much information out there on Islamic finance and like halal investing, especially not in the short form content space. And so I'm like, hey, why don't I start this? So I started Muslim investing just purely as a side hobby, as a passion, and kind of just been doing it over the past couple of years.
Sorry, what engineering did you say?
Mechatronic.
What is that?
Mechatronic engineering. Not many people have heard of it. It's fairly new. It's a mixture of mechanical, electronic, and software engineering.
So is that to do with like AI and...
Yeah, so automation and robotics, which I suppose is a very useful degree to have today. Just not something I'm super passionate about.
What made you passionate about like Islamic finance, halal investing? What made you look into that in the first place?
Yeah, so I was already interested in finance and investing, and I knew there were certain areas I had to avoid, things like banks and like pork and alcohol and things like that, but I didn't know much else. And I'm like, hey, if I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, I'm going to have investments, and if I find out one day that they're not halal, if I don't do it properly today, it's going to be a pain if I have to like sell a bunch of things because I didn't do the research earlier on. So that's when I spent time researching, and I came across websites and blogs and things like that about Islamic finance, and that's when I was like, this is really important, and I got really interested in it, and then that's how I figured out there wasn't anything in the short form content space.
What kind of content do you release?
So I started out with things like carousels and Instagram posts and things like that, just informational content. Like very brief bullet point, like going to the point with animations and things like that. And then over the years, as TikTok became more popular, video content became more popular, I've kind of pivoted more towards that. So things like Reels, TikTok, that's the kind of content I produce.
And who are your target audience?
So my target audience is actually, so it's varied in terms of location. I've got a mixture of UK, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Those make up about 65-70% of my audience, and the remaining is kind of a mixture of like India, Nigeria, and like the rest of the world. Mainly 18 to 35-year-old, mainly males, but there's about 35% females as well following.
Okay, so you're probably looking into people's or general investment lifestyle, but more on the lower end of the scale rather than the big corporates, etc.
Yeah.
So what kind of like inquiries do people ask you about?
Yeah, so I get a lot of questions about like how to start investing, what is halal investing, how do I do that, do I have enough money to invest? I get a lot of questions about that kind of thing. So like that's where I have one-on-one consultations with people, as well as just like messaging people, trying to like get them started, trying to help them with their money situation, if they have any specific questions about things, and then get them on track to kind of just start investing.
So what have you found from these like one-on-one consultation? Because generally, looking at your target audience, a lot of people think, there's two things. I don't have enough money to invest, and I don't know where or how to invest. So what kind of conversations are you having?
So some people have debt, like credit card debt and things like that, and some people just don't know how to manage their money. So we go through their finances and kind of see where they're spending their money, what kind of things they're spending their money on, and see if we can put some of that towards investing. And a lot of the time we find that you can even put like $10, $20 a week or £10, £20 a week into investments. You don't have to have like hundreds or thousands to start investing. You can start investing with literally £1. So it's like getting people on the right track, and then also then showing them the halal investment options that are available. So those that don't know where to start, a great place to kind of look into is halal stock screener. Halal stock screener. So that's basically like an app or a platform that filters through stocks, and you can put in a stock there and it'll tell you whether or not it's halal to invest in. So there are quite a few of those available, and then they go through the different markets. So whether you're looking at the US market, the UK market, those apps kind of tell you which stocks you can invest in. So it's a lot easier today to like invest in a halal way.
Yeah.
Back when I started investing, that wasn't the case, and things had to be done manually. So for someone starting today, I give them that advice, and they're able to start investing in a halal way a lot easier, a lot quicker.
Which apps do you recommend for that?
So there's a few. There's Zoya, Musaffa, Islamically. Those are three big ones that I would recommend checking out.
Okay, and they basically put a stock in like Vodafone, and then they'll say that, okay, fine, this is halal or this is a bit dodgy.
Yeah, so basically like they all have apps. You can search up the stock name. If you don't know the stock name, you can search up the company, and it'll give you a pass or a fail essentially of whether or not it's passed Sharia compliance or not. And if you pay for their premium versions, a lot of the time they can give you a full report on like where it fails and whether or not, you know, it's almost going to pass and things like that. You can have a look at that on their app.
Okay, and then after their consultation, what's the next step with you? So do you then advise them to put it in certain stocks, or how does it work?
I don't currently offer specific financial advice, but we'd have like a follow-up session, just kind of see whether or not they've started out, like opened up an investment brokerage, downloaded a halal stock screening app if they've started that, and then kind of help them where they need to. If they have any questions, then we can go through like strategies and things like that of investing. So things like dollar cost averaging, which is a method of investing where you invest on a regular basis, a specific amount, regardless of what's happening in the market. So you could be investing in an Apple share every month. You invest $100 regardless of what's happening. And the idea is that over 12 months or however long you're investing, you will be buying at an average price. So we go through strategies like that and try and help them out where they need help with.
Okay. You went full-time into Muslim investing, but before that, what were you doing?
So before that, straight out of uni, we talked about my engineering lack of experience. So then I decided to do a master's in finance. And then I worked as an equity analyst in the corporate world for a couple of months, realized it wasn't for me. And at the same time, I was working with Muslim investing and working with a bunch of other brands and things like that. And then one of the companies I was working for they were hiring. So I joined as a content marketer at Zoya Finance, and I worked with them for just over a year.
Why wasn't corporate world for you?
I just the way I work, the way I do things, I didn't like going into an office and like wearing a suit and things like that. I just preferred kind of, I think I realized I preferred more the content side of finance as opposed to the finance side.
Not the spreadsheets.
I enjoy spreadsheets, don't get me wrong, but I really enjoy like making content and like talking to people one-on-one about investing as opposed to writing investment reports and like telling people whether or not they should buy a specific stock. And I think I also didn't enjoy the fact that sort of environment is very controlled, a lot of high pressure, things like that, whereas having a conversation one-on-one just talking about finance is something I prefer doing.
Yeah, and then you can always pick out on how to improve on little bits rather than working in a high pressure
Yeah, for sure.
environment.
For sure. And also like the corporate finance world that I was working in wasn't around Islamic finance. Now my passion is Islamic finance. So although there was like the finance aspect there, I didn't have the Islamic finance part, which I missed. And so when I stumbled across the role at Zoya, it was like the perfect opportunity to have an Islamic finance in the content space as well.
Where we are in the UK anyway, we have a lot of options like Wahid, like Zoya, FIDA as well, a lot of Islamic home purchase plans as well. What's the situation in New Zealand with Islamic finance?
So the Islamic finance space in New Zealand
Is it just you?
In terms of like influencers and people in the space, there's mainly just me. But in terms of like Islamic finance companies, there's basically just one option. So we have in New Zealand we have KiwiSaver, which is the retirement scheme, which is where you can opt in to put 3 to 10% of your salary in, and then your employer matches normally 3% of that, and that money then gets invested, and then you can take it out when you retire. So up to a couple years ago, there wasn't any Islamic finance options. So an Islamic finance company called Amana started. So they started offering an Islamic finance option to invest your pension into. So that is currently the only Islamic finance option we have.
So I'm thinking of the property side. So if someone wants to buy a house in New Zealand, a Muslim wants to buy a house, what do they do? Is it just a standard conventional mortgage at the moment?
Yeah, so those who are comfortable with the option of taking out conventional mortgage do, and those who aren't typically just rent. There isn't currently any Islamic finance mortgage options in New Zealand.
What's the price points for a house to buy and a house to rent where you are in Auckland?
So houses are very expensive in Auckland. You'd be looking upwards of $1 million on like a 2-bedroom house.
How much is that in pounds?
It's about half that, it's about £500,000.
Okay.
These would be old houses and things like that. Things are very expensive. Rental, you're looking at about £2,000 a month.
So it's quite similar to here.
Yeah. So a lot of people who can't afford a house are typically just renting. In the sense that we are lucky that the rental market is fairly easy. From what I've heard here, it's quite difficult to find a rental property for long term. Whereas in New Zealand, I feel like it's a lot easier to get a rental property, but you are paying the price, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, the rental market here is a bit crazy. Just today, we've had about 270 inquiries for one house.
Wow.
Or one 3-bed flat, not even a house.
Wow.
And the market like that it's just ridiculous at the moment, but that's a whole separate conversation. But then house prices here are slowly coming down, like 5-ish%. Not a massive deal, but it's still a significant chunk.
Yeah.
Because house prices are about $500,000 here as well.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So in New Zealand, where do you see the future for like Islamic finance? Not that you will probably or may not be there in the future, but it's where you are.
To be honest, I think there needs to be a lot of education around Islamic finance, and there slowly is a lot of more masjids and like communities that are talking about Islamic finance. So I mentioned that Islamic finance retirement company that's there. They haven't received a great response from the community in terms of like signing on to their Islamic finance pension, which is quite interesting because they're the only provider that actually offers it. So if anyone who else has got a KiwiSaver or a pension scheme and they're not with them, they're technically not with someone who's halal. So there's definitely a big lack of education there, and in part I'm trying to help with that as well. But I think slowly, if we can get more people onto that, then eventually we'll get things like Islamic mortgage and things like that. But I think it will take quite a long time for New Zealand to get to that stage.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So going back to Muslim investing, how are you able to do it full time? Because it's a big commitment.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a big commitment. There's a lot of work involved. So at the moment, I'm just focusing on content, but I'll be working with other brands, launching some products, doing consultations. I'm kind of just growing my engagement, growing my audience, and kind of just seeing how it goes from there, inshallah.
And how are you trying to work with brands, or what kind of brands are you trying to work with?
So anyone in the Islamic finance space. I had a meeting with a company earlier today. So literally anyone in the Islamic finance space, I'd be open to having conversations with, seeing if we align in terms of values, and then take it from there. I have worked with a few brands over the past couple of years, but I'm looking for something a bit more consistent.
Okay. So if someone was to come to you today and said, look, I want to invest, I've got £200 a month spare, I want to invest that, do you give them like specific stocks, or do you say, look, put it in this ETF, or how do you advise them to put it in?
So what I would tell them typically is if they're new to investing and not really familiar with any types of investments just yet, what I would suggest starting out is it's a strategy called the core satellite strategy, which is where you put about 80 to 90% of your investments in low cost index funds and around the 10, 15, 20% of the remainder in individual stocks. So that 80, 90% would be in an ETF, Halal ETF, there's a number of those available. And then the remaining 15, 20%, I would tell them to put it into individual stocks that they kind of already know about. So it might be a brand that they use or familiar with, or things they like researching about. Because when starting out, it's difficult to kind of manage all those investments if you're not like aware of what those companies are doing. So that's what I would recommend starting out with.
So, you know, when someone says to you, I don't think I have enough money, or it's not material enough, what do you then push back with?
I say let's talk about how you're spending first. And if you can see that they're spending on things that they probably don't need, then I would argue that they probably can start investing. You can literally start investing with £1. So I'm sure most people have £1 that they can probably invest. I think it's about starting early, being consistent, creating those good financial habits. And that's kind of what I preach, because a lot of my audience is younger, doesn't necessarily have loads of money in the bank, but they do have some savings, and they can definitely put aside $10, $20 a week or a month and kind of just let that grow. And I think the habits that it creates along the way, so that when they do have, you know, hundreds or thousands that they can invest, by that point, it'll be so easy for them to just put that into investments.
So if someone puts in £10, £20 a week, what are they, or what do you expect them to see in about a year or even 5 years?
I mean, it varies, right? But if you're looking at mainly putting into like an ETF and things like that, you're probably going to average 7-8%. Not a great deal, but I think the habits that it creates is a lot more important when starting out. And then as they get more into it, the longer they invest, that core satellite strategy that I mentioned, they can kind of shift that. So it doesn't have to be 70-80% in index funds. If they are willing to like be a bit more active in their investments, they can look into other things, include property. If they're feeling riskier, you've got crypto, more individual stocks, gold. There's quite a few types of investments. So as they go along with the investment journey, they can kind of shift that, increase the amount, and like play around with that.
Okay, and what are some of the bad habits you've seen
Of
people not being able to invest and just general money management?
Like spending a lot on food and like shopping and things where they don't probably necessarily need to spend. Obviously a lot of youngsters spend, myself included, but also like spend a lot on food and things like that.
Uber Eats.
Yeah. And like you can make your own food, right? And you don't have to do that all the time. But if you're saying you have nothing to invest, that's maybe where you need to start looking first. So that's definitely one of like the bad habits, where especially people who can't invest or feel like they can't invest should probably look into. If you can invest and do that, that's great. But if you're saying you can't invest because you're doing this, then maybe you need to like check yourself.
You know, with Muslim investing, obviously you've created a really good platform, and you're getting a lot of people approaching you, and you're giving them solid advice. What's your goal? Where do you want to take it? And what's your like macro vision?
I would like to have a much bigger audience, and have more people coming to me as the trusted source with investing, with halal investing. I'd like to be able to convince a lot more people that they can start investing, and break down those myths about investing and how it's so difficult to start, or not everyone can invest, or there's not a halal way to invest. I'd like to be that brand that people think of when they think of halal investing.
And then, is there like a social impact side for you as well?
In what sense?
In terms of increasing the Muslim economy, or making the Muslim pound work, and just growing the Muslim money essentially?
Oh yeah, for sure. We are stronger as Muslims when we are wealthier, because we can, support more Muslims, give back to the community and things like that. So that's definitely very important to me. And something I'd like to be able to do is also like invest in more Muslim companies and things like that, which, would help them grow and then also increase the Muslim community, the Muslim economy.
When you say invest in Muslim companies, in what sense? As in just
Like startups, like angel investing, VC investing, that kind of investing.
okay, is that something you want to do in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of partake in that in a small way, but I'd like to do that on a bigger scale, to help more Muslims, grow their startups.
Okay, and the ones that you've done on a small amount, how have you helped them grow? Is it just simply just a investor?
Yeah, simply in an investment at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, that's quite good. And then when you started to do Muslim investing full time, or when you started to do Muslim investing, it was more of a passion project, you'd say, and now it's turning into a full-time role. How are you trying to monetize it for yourself?
So at the moment, I'm looking at more brand partnerships. Also, introducing things like an online course or an ebook, and also through just adverts and things like that as well. As I kind of, not pivot, but introduce more longer form content and things like that as well.
Are you planning to do a lot more longer form content?
In the near future, yes. Yeah.
Okay. So the people that you're working with, what kind of results, could you share some of the results they've had or they're currently going through? So they've started investing according to your advice.
So I don't really look at the individual investment performance, but when I talk to those people who have had an initial chat with them, they come back with a lot of positive feedback and they've really changed their life around in terms of their finances. They can see hope with their finances and things like that, and they're a lot happier for it.
Happier in terms of as in it's clear to them.
Yeah, so they don't feel so lost or they can't do things. They're optimistic with their spending for their future. Yeah, in that sense.
Okay, and then for you, what kind of impact do you want on them? As in, because obviously they're saving. Not only are they saving, example, £200 a month, but they're growing that £200 a month. And then is there a goal you set them okay, try and save for a deposit for a house or a car, or do you set them goals that they want to achieve?
Yeah, so we definitely talk about that. A big thing about investing is there's no point investing just for the sake of investing. There has to be a goal aligned with it.
Yeah.
So is there a short-term investment goal, a long-term investment goal? Is it for retirement? Is it for a house? Is it for a wedding? And that's kind of a few things we talk about in that initial session. So depending on obviously what their goals are, you check in with those things and see if they're on the right track.
Okay. And then now you're traveling quite a bit. How are you managing to create the content? Because you have a daughter as well, right?
Yeah. So it is a bit crazy, but so I've spent the last month just recording a bunch of videos, and I'm now working with an editor as well who's joined the team, and hopefully those videos will be going out over the next couple of months, inshallah. But it's on the go. It's sitting in cafes, with my headphones on, trying to get as much work done as I can.
How do you record in cafes?
I'm not recording in cafes. That's more like editing and doing other work, yeah. And script writing, ideas, that kind of thing. That's all done in cafes. I'm not at that stage yet where I'm recording in the cafe.
So when you're planning your content, because this is obviously a massive part. It's probably the biggest part to what you do. Mm-hmm. How are you planning it? Or are you looking at trends? Are you looking at what people are asking you or your comments online? Or is it just simply as this is what's happening at the moment, or this is what I'm comfortable speaking about? How are you planning your content? So
it's a mixture of that. So I do get questions about people asking about specific things like, what is a waqf, for example? So then I would create a piece of content on what waqf is. But yeah, also a mixture of what's trending. Things like Forex was recently trending, Islamic whether Forex is halal to invest in. So I did a piece of content on that. But I kind of just look at also things I do. and like things I think would be useful for people to know. So it's a mixture of questions I get asked, trends, as well as like topics I'm familiar with and comfortable talking about.
Going back to your point on Waqf, for those who don't know, what is it?
So a Waqf is a charity endowment. So that's where money is invested for charity purposes, and then invested so that it can be given to for a purpose.
So we have a foundation called National Waqf Foundation, or is it foundation? I think anyways, NWF, and they do something similar. From what my understanding is, they buy property, and the returns from that they put it into community needs, such as community centres or youth clubs or whatever their needs are. So that's what they do over here. So that's one way people say, well, you're investing in your hereafter, but it's self-sufficient.
Oh yeah. No, so instead of just investing in money, giving money to charity, and then it's kind of just used. This is like they invest that money, and then the returns are then used for the purposes, and that money keeps growing. So they have a pool of money that can fund the charity as well as projects.
Yeah. Are there any examples of Waqf that you've seen people invest in, or you would advise people to put their money into?
So there are a few Waqf companies that are around that I've heard of. There's Waqf Engine, which is by a group of brothers in Australia, and you've also got After Fund, which is another one where, like I mentioned, they are investing the money into projects that will then, the returns will then be used to fund those projects.
Okay. Going back to planning your content, because this is now your full-time role, you're traveling with how old is your daughter?
13 months now, yeah.
13 months old. You're literally flipping time zones upside down. How are you able to continue posting content and then plan as well?
So it's kind of just as I'm going, I'm kind of just like meeting different people in the Islamic finance space. I'm coming up with new ideas on the go, and then now I've got an editor who's taking care of the editing side of the videos, and then just posting literally as I'm going along. I've got a schedule I kind of try and stick to, and that's how I'm doing it.
So what are the topics you've planned to speak about next?
So there's a range of topics, from budgeting to investment strategies to money ideas, Islamic finance terms. It's a big range in ideas and things of videos that'll be out.
How are you educating yourself with this? Because it's a very broad topic. Obviously, you've got the MBA in finance, which gives you a good base. But how are you generally educating yourself?
A lot of reading, listening to podcasts, speaking to people in the industry, doing my own research. That's where I get a lot of my information from.
What books or newsletters would you recommend?
So IFG, Islamic Finance Guru, they are a good resource that I like to look into. They've also got a book, which is quite helpful. So that's definitely one resource that I use. And the other sources just come from people that I individually speak to in companies like Wahid and other companies like that.
You spoke about budgeting. For the average person, budgeting is getting a lot more difficult because the cost of living is going up, and I think it's easy to say, well, just cut down on your luxury spends because you're used to a certain way of life.
Yeah.
What kind of advice do you give to someone who is trying to budget? Like I'm in the middle of a cost of living crisis where rents are going up, bills have gone up, food prices have gone up.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's honestly not easy. But yeah, it's like what I would say is track your spending for the next 1 or 2 months. See what areas you spend money on, and then kind of see if you can cut down. And if you can't, then maybe you have to try and figure out a way to earn more income, which is not easy, I know. But it's tracking your money for 1 or 2 months, and then that is a good way to kind of see where you spend a lot of your money, and then see if those categories reflect what you actually enjoy spending money on. That's where I would tell them to start.
Okay, and then what about like increasing their income which you mentioned, it's not easy, but at times like this, a lot of people have two jobs. Well, to be honest, even if you look at 30, 40 years ago, our parents, grandparents, a lot of them had 2-3 jobs. So it's something that's been happening for some period. But how do you advise people? What do you tell people when they need to increase their income? Like, do you just say get another job or start a side hustle?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the type of person, but what it comes down to is like learning a high skill, learning a new skill that, will really help you. So whether that's like coding, or sales or marketing or something like that. And you find that a lot of jobs nowadays don't even require a degree. So for example, my wife did a bachelor's in English and politics, did a master's in teaching. That was a total of 4 years of education. She did a 10-week tech accelerator, and got a job straight after that. So there's a lot of jobs, especially in the tech space, that don't require as much experience. So I would say investing in that. So if you are struggling with finances and things like that, instead of investing in investments, investing in yourself might be a bigger priority for you to try and increase your income. So investing in learning a new skill, investing in a tech accelerator, if that's something you want to think about, that would probably be more helpful. And then with that, starting something. So either a side hustle or joining a company, that's what I would say.
That's quite interesting, because you're encouraging people to work or develop their skills, which is another form of investment. It's not the form of investment everyone thinks about, but it's a form of investment which still gives you probably more than 10.
ROI.
Yeah, exactly. More than 10x.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. What do you say would make a successful investor? What makes a successful investor? Would you say it's discipline, to generate the best?
Yeah, I mean, discipline, consistency, those are important traits of a good investor, I would say.
And then how difficult is that to achieve? Or is it easy once you've set your...
Yeah, and that's why, even if you're 18 and don't have a great deal of money, even if you're investing $10 a month, I think by doing that, you will become a good investor if you can do that. And a great way to do that, especially if you're earning money, is before you start paying other people, pay yourself.
Yeah.
So, automatically set up a transfer that goes into your investment account every month, whatever amount it is, so that then whatever's left you can spend. So you've already taken care of yourself, you've taken care of your investment, and then you're setting up yourself up in the future.
I think it's in Rich Dad Poor Dad. He says to pay your bills last, because look after yourself first and then pay everything else last. So you have enough for the month.
Yeah, and that's like with budgeting, you can either budget in advance, saying, look, I'm going to set aside $500 or £500 for groceries, £200 for this, or you can have automatic transfers that go into whatever you need to take care of, whatever needs to be taken care of, and then whatever's left you can just spend. So you've paid off whatever you need to pay off. So that includes yourself, your rent, everything like that, and then whatever's left you can spend, as opposed to just spending first and then realize you don't actually have enough money to invest or pay for other things that are important.
To be honest, with the new banks like Starling, you can create them automatic transfers. It can help you budget. You can see where your spend is. So it's a very transparent way of looking at your finances in a very easy way as well. And then you have, because I have, for example, my bills is in a separate space, a separate account, and there's an automatic transfer, so I know my bills are covered. I don't need to worry about that. So I think looking at these new banks rather than the standard NatWest or Barclays, who don't have these features, these new banks help so much more.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And whenever someone says to me, I don't know, I'm struggling, I don't know where I'm spending, I always say just open one of these banks. It can help you track your spending, so you don't have to sit there, pen and paper, work everything out.
Exactly. And the interface is a lot easier to use, and it just makes managing your money a lot easier.
Yeah, 100%. In terms of investing in startups, is that something you create content on or planning to create content on? Because that's not for everyone.
No, it's not. I will likely be touching on it, but most of my audience are beginner investors, so I wouldn't recommend starting out with investing in a startup. That's probably not where you want to start out. Those kind of investments are a lot riskier. The returns are potentially a lot higher, but they're a lot riskier. So it's better to start off with smaller, safer investments and kind of just increase that first before you get into the more risky ones.
How do you find a good startup to invest in?
So through connections, through networking, meeting people. LinkedIn is a great resource. And then also you have VC funds that you can invest in directly if you don't want to be the one looking for companies, which is an easy task. And also not everyone can just find a company and be like, hey, can I invest in you? It's not always that simple. So investing through a VC, there are some Islamic VCs available. You've got Wahid's Ventures, and then you've also got Curate by IFG. Those are two Islamic VC spaces in the UK, which you can potentially invest in. But I believe you have to be a sophisticated investor. So that means either you're a high net worth individual or you are very comfortable with higher risk investments.
Is one of your goals, would you say, to create a platform like Curate or Wahid where people can invest through you, or is that like not part of your plan going forward?
Well, definitely not in the short term, but not something I wouldn't be open to in the future. I'd be very open to exploring different opportunities in the Islamic finance space. I think that's where my core interest lies. So anything in that space I'd kind of be open to down the line.
You get a lot of people who say, well, Islamic finance, a lot of it is just worded differently, especially when it comes to, for example, the home purchase plans. They say, well, it's still interest because they still use 7%, 8%, whatever they're using at the moment. And it's interesting because I spoke to a Islamic finance broker recently, and he was saying the bank works in the same way a conventional bank uses their funds to fund the lending. Islamic banks use the same, and they give, I think Al Rayan Bank are giving like a 4% return on a savings account. They then use that money to lend, and they basically charge about 6 or 7%. Because the reason the rates are so similar to banks is because it's competition. To the conventional banks, it's competition. It's not because of, it's not pegged to the interest rate. It's just they're our competition. And for people to put money into Al Rayan Bank or any Islamic bank gatehouse, they need to see a better return than they're seeing with Starling, example. So that's why their rates are higher. But at the same time, that's why their home purchase plans are slightly more expensive. But my question to you is, what would you say to certain people who are saying, well, Islamic finance is just covering interest with different wording, with the word profit?
I mean, I made a video on Islamic mortgages and the different types of it, and a lot of the feedback was that they sound the same, and they do. From the outside, they look very similar. You are getting money from another institution, and then you're paying back more money. That's what it looks like from the outside. So a conventional mortgage, Islamic mortgage, they both from the outside look very similar, but the difference is the contract and the intentions behind what's happening there. Like with a conventional bank, when you are borrowing the money, the bank is lending you the money, you then purchase the property and you pay back interest on that money. Whereas with an Islamic mortgage, the bank buys the property and you are paying back rent and buying back the equity in that property. So you go in, you put down 20%, the bank puts 80%, you own 20% of the house, the bank owns 80%, you're eventually buying out their equity, so then you own it. That's how it works in Islamic mortgage. They do look very similar, but they're not the same. I can't speak for practicality or what happens in the industry, but from a theoretical level and Islamic level, that's how they operate.
Because the Islamic mortgages are a bit more expensive, people are still obviously leaning towards the conventional mortgage, because it's in East London, example, you can save £200 to £400 a month by going to a conventional mortgage. But obviously there's longer term issues with interest, not only in the Islamic way, but spiritually, and then obviously it's a very immoral way to earn money. It's literally making the rich richer, poor poorer. What kind of feedback have you had on your Islamic mortgage videos, and why is interest, to put in a different word, why is interest so immoral to the society?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. Yeah, a lot of the feedback is that Islamic mortgages are more expensive, but like you said, there's a reason for that because it costs Islamic financial institutions more to raise the money. They can't just go to the Federal Reserve or the bank and get money at a low interest rate. That's what the big banks do. They borrow money from other banks, and the interest rates are very low. Whereas Islamic banks raise the money, so it costs more for them to get the money. Hence, they charge more. But like you also said, it allows the rich to get richer and the poor to get poorer. It's a very exploitative relationship. There is no risk on the lender, and with Islamic finance, both parties, there is a joint risk and profit loss relationship.
Okay, and where you are in New Zealand, you're saying obviously in the future you're hoping for home purchase plans. Is there a way that people pool money together, not necessarily pool money together, but lend money to others to help them buy houses? Like literally fund it cash? Because it happens here in states that.
So there are a number of individuals who do that, but more on a private level, where like close friends or family have pooled money together to buy a property, and then they rent out that property, or one of those individuals live in that property and are paying rent, and then the investors receive a return. That does happen, but on a very small scale, but nothing official that the masses can opt into.
And property investing isn't something you advise on at the moment, isn't it?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, fine.
No, but if you have the money,
do it.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the best returns and safest returns.
Yeah, and in terms of having that as an option, if you don't have enough money to buy a property or put down a deposit, there are companies, Islamic finance companies, that have a property crowdfunding platform where you can, again, pool in money with other investors. With these companies, you can sometimes put as low as £100, and maybe you're pooled in with 100, 200 other people, and then receive a return on that rate. So those options are available if you want to include property in your portfolio.
Yeah, we have yielders here who do that. We had a company called Igloo Crowd. I'm not sure if they still do it. And then FIDA have
Grow your home.
Grow Your Home Savings Account, which we did a podcast with Raza, and it was like he explained it in a very detailed manner. And again, that helps people get on the ladder. And I think there are options in the UK where we're definitely, since probably 2020, you've seen a rise in different companies. Like you've got Zoya, Wahid, Yielders, FIDA. All of these companies slowly are coming in, and we're seeing slowly people are turning. And I think especially after this whole Palestine situation, we're seeing a lot of people more worried about their finances, not on an individual basis, but on more of a community basis. So we're seeing Muslim businesses like Amazing, who we were just speaking about, where he promotes other Muslim businesses, and you've got people like Osama Musa, who I'm not sure you're aware of, but Muslim Amiri, and he focuses on pushing Muslim business leaders and helping them in their business. And again, everything circles around growing the Muslim pound or the Muslim dollar. And I think that's something that will 100% help us. And like you were saying earlier on, Muslims need wealth.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier. If you have a certain amount of wealth and you can have a whole media outlet and become a trusted media outlet, whether it's pulled in by a whole number of investors, it makes such a massive difference in terms of just the way the news is interpreted. Not even just a Palestine situation, but just generally the way we see Muslims portrayed in the news on a subconscious level. And I think that's where I can see where Muslim investing will help the lower end, or the younger end rather, budget better, grow their money, and again in a halal manner.
It's getting those youth on the right track, so that when they get to an older age, they have more money and they're able to give back more. and it just makes us stronger as an ummah. And like you said, a more trusted source in general across the board for those who have more money, and you'll be able to give back more money, and it just works for everyone.
You said trusted source. So when you first started Muslim investing, how did people trust you? As in, did you introduce yourself as someone who's got masters in finance, or were people were you just creating content of your own journey? Because it didn't start off as a work. You're just like, I just want to do it.
So it's quite interesting. So when I started out, I remained anonymous, I think, for a good 6 months. I also hadn't done a master's of finance, so I had just had my engineering experience, and it was all just self-taught. The only experience I had was that I had been investing for a number of years prior to that. I was just posting general content. Like, people resonated with the information. I think that's what allowed me to increase my audience. And only after about 6 months, that's when I kind of showed my face and gave a bit more information as to who I was. When I started out, it was just complete anonymity.
But now you're sharing bits from your own portfolio, which obviously that automatically gains credibility, and then people like to see that and, well, you're talking about it, but you're showing proof in the pudding.
Yeah. So like I've recently started to show a bit more of my investment portfolio and things like that, and the fact that I now have a master's in finance. I've worked in the Islamic finance industry for over a year now. There is a lot more credibility associated with Muslim investing, I think.
What's next now? What's your next steps? You've got your editor, you bought a camera, you're planning your content, you're traveling the world, finding a place to settle. What's next after all of that?
I think just growing the brand as well as monetizing it in a bigger way. Those are the next steps that I'm taking at the moment. So I'm in the stage where I'm working out what the best steps are to take in terms of monetization, and then growing the brand as well.
What other countries are you visiting? UK, you've been to?
Been to Malaysia, Sydney, Vietnam, Indonesia, Singapore. I'll be heading to Dublin and then also Turkey, inshallah.
Dublin for holiday? You got family there?
I've got a sister there who's recently had a baby, so I'm going to be spending some time with the little one.
And then Turkey?
Turkey, my parents have recently moved to Antalya, so we're going to be spending 2 months there, inshallah. Spend some time with the grandparents for my little one.
And then you're going to decide where to settle?
Yeah, so then we'll be heading back to New Zealand, hopefully trying to figure out where we want to settle.
Where's UK on your list to live in?
And not to settle per se, but we'll always be coming back here, I think, on a regular basis, at least once a year, to visit family. Most of my family still are in the UK.
Okay, and because all you need is a camera, pen and paper, or a laptop, and you can literally work from anywhere. So you've got that perfect lifestyle.
Perfect is an interesting word to use, but yeah, no, alhamdulillah.
People love traveling and working.
People love traveling and working. It's a lot more glamorous on the outside, but it's practical for like the way I live in terms of where we have family based. It'd be a bit more difficult to see all our family if I was tied to being in person in a specific country.
Yeah, because from New Zealand, you said before it takes 10 hours just to Malaysia. Yeah. So you're literally just away from everything.
Oh, literally.
You can't even catch a short flight.
No, so it's like a 17-hour flight to Dubai and then about 6.5, 7 hours from there to here. So it takes quite a long time. So whenever we do travel, we end up traveling for quite a bit of time because it just takes so long to get to a place.
Okay, just one final question before a quick fire round. If you had a 18-year-old Muhammad sitting next to you before you signed up to uni, what advice would you give him?
I would ask him whether or not he's going to university because he actually wants to go, or just because he's been told that it's the right thing to do. I think a lot of the time now, with a career path, there isn't just one way to get there. Although I have a degree in engineering and a master's in finance, the roles that I've had and the ones that I've enjoyed and where it's led to me today is through my Instagram. So you don't necessarily need to go to university to do what you want to do, but I think it's important for you to kind of try out different things before you kind of just do what everyone tells you to do. That is what I would say.
Okay. Why did you go uni? You were told, or?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, there wasn't as many options. I think it's only a number of years ago now, but it was still the norm to go to university. And things like short-term accelerators or being an online content creator weren't really a thing for a lot of people. And I wasn't sure. But I think now I would have probably tried out more things back then instead of spending all that money on university. Yeah.
Okay, just a quick fire round before we finish. Favorite food?
Favorite food?
This is going to be interesting because you're traveling.
It varies by cuisine, but Indian would be dal chawal.
Okay.
Otherwise, I like Chinese fried rice. I make a pretty good Chinese fried rice.
Favorite holiday destination?
I feel like Malaysia ticks a lot of the boxes on a holiday destination, for sure.
Where in Malaysia?
KL.
KL. Favorite book?
Favorite book, Atomic Habits.
I've never heard of that.
Oh, it's a really good book.
What is it about?
Atomic Habits, about...
Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits, yeah.
Yeah. That's on my list to read, actually.
Yeah.
Favorite day of the week?
Good question. Monday. There we go.
What's your actual favorite day?
I feel like Wednesday/Thursday, just because it's the middle of the week, and then if I haven't got the things I need to do, there is still more time to do those things.
Muhammad, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for
having me.
It's been a
pleasure.
Likewise.